A black nationalist gets $20 million to promote segregation in public schools. That was a recent headline from the Free Press. The alleged black nationalist is Philadelphia native Sharif El-Mekki, who's become a major influencer in public education, first in Pennsylvania and now beyond. He's even testified in front of Congress on the need for more teachers of color, that's a good thing, and has also penned various op-eds in national outlets and given a TED Talk in January of 2023 where he advocated for a connection between activism and teaching black students superbly. El-Mekki caught the attention and also the pocketbook of some of the nation's biggest philanthropists. His premise is, and here's where we get a little dicey, that there needs to be black education for black students. In other words, he thinks black students should be taught by black teachers. But isn't that premise sort of racist? I think if we insisted that white students had to be taught by white teachers, that would become perfectly obvious. The Free Press's Francesca Block wrote the story. She joins us now to discuss. Thanks for coming to Rising.
Thanks for having me.
So tell us more about this story and just how, important this person is. We're not just, picking on some random activist who has some ideas I would describe as kooky, but someone who attracted millions of dollars in significant public support. No?
Absolutely. And I think you covered well kind of what he does and the contradictions in his work. This is somebody who has the ears of some of the biggest influencers in Democratic politics today. As you mentioned, he's got $20 million in the bank for his nonprofit, and he's got funders like the Bezos Foundation, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. These are really big players that he's getting funding from and getting the attention of. And in addition to that, he also has worked on the transition team for Governor Josh Shapiro in Pennsylvania. He has worked with the Pennsylvania Department of Education. And so he really has gotten to the top in terms of influence on educational reform and being able to shape what the future of public education, at least in Pennsylvania and beyond, might look like.
And I want to make sure we're not misrepresenting him or anything like that. He takes the position, according to your reporting, that it might be better for black students to be taught exclusively by black teachers. I mean, that sounds like a crazy idea.
So his nonprofit advocates that Black students should be taught by same-race teachers. That's under kind of their vision, their message on their website and their programming. Now, whether or not that means exclusively Black teachers, I'm not 100% sure. Unfortunately, I tried to reach out to El-Mekki for comment to try to talk to him more about his work, and he didn't get back to me. He didn't respond multiple times. However, I think when you think of the idea of, as you mentioned at the beginning, having more Black teachers in public education, that's actually a very good thing. That sounds very good. It's probably good for America. I think where it does get dicey is, does he mean that it should be only Black teachers teaching Black students? And it sounds really kooky and it sounds really strange, but we actually have seen something like this implemented in schools across the country. In Evanston, Illinois, for example, there are actually classes that are segregated based on race for different subjects. Like for Black students and Latino students, they can take different math classes than white students. And so it sounds really fringe, but we're actually seeing these types of ideologies being implemented in public school systems across the country.
Well, the devil's in the details, as you know, because we do have strong laws around this. And in those instances, I'm assuming it's not explicitly saying if you're a Latino, you can only take this math class as a Latino. And if you are an African-American, you can only take this class if you're African-American. I think like all universities, there's a diversity of different types of educational experiences, different classes. On his website, it's very clear that they're just trying to rebuild the Black teacher pipeline. And I understand what he's stating in terms of, Black kids should be able to receive education from Black teachers. But has he had any sort of legal pushback? Because it doesn't seem like he's saying only Black teachers. It really just seems like they're trying to offer opportunities for Black kids to have teachers that look and understand them and also just have a little bit more diversity of thought from teachers and experiences from teachers.
Yeah, I'm not sure if they've faced any legal pushback in their work so far, given kind of the level of influence he's had in Pennsylvania specifically. I assume they have not. And on that point, as I said before, I do think it's really important to try to recruit and retain more Black teachers in public education in America. But when you start to dig into the details of what are they teaching and training these teachers to teach their students, you start to realize that they are training teachers to be not necessarily educators, but to be activists. They say this specifically in their programming on their website that teachers should be activists. And I want to quote here from one guide that his organization created with the Pennsylvania Department of Education, where they literally write that, quote, every lesson plan is a political document and every classroom interaction a political statement. And so I think that, again, training teachers, getting more teachers, Black teachers especially, into the pipeline, retaining them, making sure that they're happy and doing well in their jobs, that's a wonderful goal. But what are they actually teaching these teachers? And are they teaching them to teach, or are they teaching them to be ideologues in the classroom?
Yeah, this story reminded me of that document that periodically gets circulated and embarrasses everyone, the aspects of white supremacy training modules, which have been used in schools time and time again, that start to say that, well, here are traits of whiteness and here are traits of blackness. And again, this is from people who are supposedly positioning themselves as the anti-racist, but are saying things like, yes, being on time is more an aspect of whiteness, or taking good notes, or being good at taking tests. Like, well, I think that's reinforcing actually some very negative stereotypes about Black people or other minorities. It's then, and to teach that to kids, it's almost like expecting them to fail and excusing it because of their race. It's the exact opposite we want in our schools. I want activism counter to that. I want teachers to behave as if any student, because obviously the students have a range of abilities, but that has nothing to do with their race. It can have to do with the home life they have and poverty, and sometimes those things correlate with race because of reality. But to pretend that you can't succeed because there's something innate to your whiteness or blackness or anything else, that's the opposite of what we want in our schools.
Yeah, and for this story, I spoke to a woman named Dr. Mika Hackner, who works for an organization called the Jewish Institute for Liberal Values. And she talked about this, and I quoted her in my piece, where, this type of education, it makes everything about the classroom, everything about school surround identity, who you are, whether or not your identity sets you up to succeed or not succeed. And her point, which I think is a really important one, is that if all we do in the classroom is focus on identity, we've kind of torn apart the fabric of what it means to be an American, to be able to talk to people and find common ground on many different issues, to be able to work together and overcome differences and all of that. And so she says that that could be actually really quite destructive for civil discourse if this is the type of educational model that is adopted across the country.
Francesca, it does seem, though, as I understand what this woman quoted, but it does seem, though, that these teachers, they're looking at it through the lens as teaching is activism, not what we are teaching is political. It's that the act of having more Black teachers, because they're underrepresented across the country, is a form of activism, just like civic engagement is. But also just from their website, these are still teachers who are teaching math and science. It's not like they're teaching some sort of Black power agenda. It's just they're trying to make a case for the fact that there are not enough Black teachers in schools. And of course, that's gonna, anger some folks, and they might think it's segregation, and it might even be branded in a way that can appear that way. But again, we have strong laws in this country, separate but equal, we all remember. And I think that from my interpretation, he is just trying to highlight the fact that there are not enough Black teachers, and especially in Black communities where that matters. Again, there's still a teaching curriculum. These are public schools. There's standardized education in these schools. And not to mention, while he may have worked for Shapiro on his transition team, it's still a Republican legislature in Pennsylvania. So have you seen pushback in Pennsylvania from the Republican Party there that is very powerful, as we know?
Well, I want to push back just a little bit on your first point, which is, again, that they're only teaching teachers to basically, enter the profession and want to be a part of the profession. I mean, again, just quoting from this guide that they made with the Department of Education in Pennsylvania, it's called the Anti-Racist Guide to Teacher Retention. And it says that education is a political act that can, and this is a quote, upend white supremacy and a racist history of using education as an oppressive social force. And so I do think that this idea of racial politics is embedded in how this group teaches and trains future teachers. And so I think that is something to consider and something we should talk about. This group doesn't keep it a secret. It's very public in all of, their work that they do. And so I think that opens it up to conversation. Is that how teachers should be taught? And is that how teachers should be teaching students? In terms of Republican pushback in Pennsylvania, I haven't seen much in that regard. Again, he's worked with the Department of Education in Pennsylvania. He works with the Philadelphia School District, one of the biggest school districts in the country. So as of right now, I don't think he's getting a ton of pushback. I actually think it's quite the opposite. I think he's gained quite a prominent position and a lot of influence as a result.
Francesca, thanks so much for joining us to break this down. We really appreciate it. It was a fascinating topic.
Thank you both so much.